Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about the 2018 NFL Draft Class, specifically the top 5 interior defensive linemen in this particular draft class based on analytics. And today's video is going to go over a lot of different data points, from athleticism data to production data. I've done a couple videos in the past in terms of top 5 defensive tackles. The one thing I can tell you is those videos were made all the way back in May. So those were really videos just to preview the 2018 or 2017 season. These videos is what the final rankings are in terms of the top 5 interior defensive linemen in this draft class coming up in only a couple days. So this is going to be the most current data that's available. If there are other defensive tackles that you don't see on this list, buy the 2018 NFL Draft Analytics Guide. Link is in the description. I did profiles on many 3-4 defensive ends, nose tackles, and 4-3 defensive tackles, and they are pretty much going to have all the data I'm showing you today, but on players that I just happen to not cover. So again, be sure to buy the 2018 NFL Draft Analytics Guide so that you can get all the information on pretty much all the relevant 3-4 DNs, defensive tackles, and nose tackles that are in this draft class based on data. And if you're new to the channel, terms and definitions will be in the description. So, starting with the 5th best interior defensive lineman in this draft class based on analytics, that is Daron Payne, nose tackle out of Alabama. When you look at his overall production data, not that great. 61.09 is his highest solo tackle score, which doesn't really hit the areas that he really needs to hit in terms of the All-Pro threshold, Pro Bowl threshold. Does hit at least the starter threshold in terms of his data. When you look at the averages at the position, this makes his data a little bit worse as well. Again, this is what the average score for an All-Pro nose tackle is, the average score for a Pro Bowl nose tackle, and the average score for a starting nose tackle since the 1989 NFL Draft Class. So Payne's production is not his strong suit, but the reason he's number 5 on this list is because of his athleticism traits. Had a 72.81 explosive lower body strength score, 94.82 speed score, and 84.45 flexibility score. All those numbers hit All-Pro potential thresholds. And again, with Payne, even though he is tested like a pretty good athlete, he's a lot more projection than he is actual reality. The truth of the matter is Daron Payne has a much better chance of becoming a long-term starting nose tackle than he does a All-Pro or Pro Bowl nose tackle. If he goes on to become a 3-time Pro Bowler or 3-time All-Pro player at the nose tackle position, then he's going to buck the trends and become an outlier. But again, based on the data since the 1989 NFL Draft Class, there's not been a player like Daron Payne, even with great athleticism, that's gone on to become an elite player at the next level because of his production traits. But you never know. So that's something that I can say about Daron Payne. Is his athleticism traits are good enough that there's a chance he could be better than what his production data numbers say. But at the same time, there definitely is a lot of question marks here because of that. When we get to number 4 player on this list, Rasheem Green, 3-4 defensive end out of USC. I'm evaluating him as an interior defensive lineman based on the fact that most boards I've seen, especially NFL Draft Scout, etc., kind of have him as a 3-4 defensive end. So he is a guy that needs to put on some weight to get to that position, and some people have him as a 4-3 DN, but I'm purely measuring him as an interior defensive lineman, which is what he did a lot of at USC. And when you get to his production data, pretty decent. 64.20 in terms of his solo tackle data, 87.94 in terms of sack data, and 82.10 in terms of TFL data. Doesn't really hit the All-Pro threshold or Pro Bowl threshold, but does hit at least above the starter threshold. When you look at the averages at the position, the only major question mark is his solo tackle data, because the solo tackle data doesn't really hit the averages of starters at the 3-4 DN spot. But he does have, again, pretty good sack data, pretty good TFL data. And when you get to his athleticism data, 56.15 explosive lower body strength score, 89.06 speed score, and an 86.91 flexibility score. Pretty much hits all the thresholds you're looking for in terms of Pro Bowl potential as an interior defensive lineman. Now again, chances of him becoming a Pro Bowler, chances of him becoming an All-Pro player, not as high as you would expect, but has better production traits than Daron Payne and much better athleticism traits than Daron Payne in some respects, which is why he is here where he is. I think personally when it comes to Rasheem Green, you're looking at a guy who's more so a long-term starter, but I do think there is a lot of positives to him, which is why he's number 4 in this list. Then we get to the third best interior defensive lineman in this draft class, which is Harrison Phillips, nose tackle out of Stanford. When you get to his production data, very, very good. 95.43 in terms of solo tackle data, 89.59 in terms of sack data, and 95.82 in terms of tackle for loss data. All very, very strong marks. Followed by, when you look at the averages at the position, he pretty much is above the All-Pro average in terms of his solo tackle, sack, and TFL data. So again, Harrison Phillips is by far one of the most productive interior defensive linemen in this draft class. And then you add on top of that, very good athleticism traits, with the exception of speed. 76.98 in terms of his explosive lower body strength, 88.30 in terms of flexibility, and 36.13 in terms of speed. So his only trait that doesn't really fit the mold of a Pro Bowler is his speed score, but still very strong overall traits in terms of explosion, very strong traits in terms of flexibility, very good production traits. The bottom line is Harrison Phillips is just a guy who screams to be at least a very serviceable defensive lineman in this draft class. And I would even go even further to say that even though his upside is not exactly sky high with a guy like Harrison Phillips, he does have traits on paper to where it'd be very, very likely that he goes on to become a long-term starting defensive lineman. In fact, very more likely he becomes that than many of the other defensive tackles in this draft class. And then we get to number 2 in this list, Taven Bryan, defensive tackle out of Florida. When you get to his production traits, he had a 77.24 solo tackle score, 79.96 sack score, and 49.61 in terms of flexibility testing. Doesn't hit the All-Pro thresholds, but does hit at least above the Pro Bowl thresholds in terms of his production traits. And then you get to the averages at the position, which is the only area where he runs into some issues, is when it comes to the starter average and Pro Bowl average in terms of TFL. So he has decent solo tackle data, decent sack data, but his TFL data is not where it needs to be. Then, of course, when you get to his athleticism traits, 88.96 in terms of explosive lower body strength score, 52.34 in terms of speed, and 87.47 in terms of flexibility for his size. So very explosive, very flexible player. Speed score is a little wonky, I will admit, but does have very, very good athleticism traits. I mean, there's no stretch around this. Pretty much looks like a Pro Bowl defensive tackle based on his overall data. The reason he's number 2 is because he has a slightly better speed score than Harrison Phillips. He's also a little bit younger prospect as well, which is kind of why he's kind of bumped up here, is that there might be some upside due to his age, more so than a guy like Harrison Phillips to a certain extent. But very, very good overall profile. So again, Taven Bryan definitely should be considered one of the best defensive tackles in this draft class based on his all-around data, which brings us to the final player in this list, Maurice Hurst, defensive tackle out of Michigan. When you get to his production data, he had a 96.60 solo tackle score, 44.55 sack score, and 83.66 flexibility, or TFL score. When you look at his overall production data, he doesn't really look like an all-pro player, but does have very similar traits to Pro Bowl players. He's a little bit off in terms of his sack score, but not by much. And then when you look at the averages at the position, as you can see, the only real question mark is his sack score. So, you know, very strong marks in terms of solo tackles, very strong marks in terms of TFL, and the only area where there's some concern is with his sack score. And then when you get to his athleticism data, pretty decent all around, 62.44 in terms of explosive lower body strength, 79.42 in terms of speed, and 60.11 in terms of flexibility for his size. All very strong marks, all marks that look very Pro Bowl level when you look at his athleticism traits, for the most part. If not so, very close to all-pro ability, with the exception of just being a little bit off in terms of explosion score. The bottom line is, when you look at this particular draft class in terms of defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen in general, is that none of these players are perfect. There are no Aaron Donalds in this class. Aaron Donald was a guy that hit everything out of the park in terms of his production data, his athleticism data. There's no J.J. Watts. There's no Ndamukong Suhs. There's no Vince Wilforks. There's no special defense tackles. There's a lot of really good players. There's a lot of players that have a good chance to become long-term starters. But if you're looking for a high-quality interior defensive lineman in this particular draft class, you're not necessarily going to find that. You're going to find guys that are a little below the standard that other guys have had in the past. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, this is not a class to go all crazy and trade a bunch of picks for interior defensive linemen. This is just a class where if the guy falls to you, you take him. And of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Jimmetrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know. Hit that notification button so that you're always reminded when another video of mine drops. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.